I have no doubt of that. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we love you so much and thank you for your loving kindness, your goodness. Thank you, Lord, for how that you have blessed us in so many ways. And thank you, Lord, not only for your word, but for your people and the experience, Lord, that they have pulled together and written in books and given us, Lord, so that we can walk with some knowledge and understanding. So today we ask you to bless Katie, minister to her, lift us up, and cause us to give you praise and glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Come on, Katie. God bless you.
All right. So last week, when I developed the first couple of weeks worth of notes, it really was meant so that, make it short, succinct, get to the good stuff, the meat. But then Elizabeth said, "You're going too fast." So I agree. I was trying to go fast so that we could get to a certain place. But I'm decided, let's just go back and look at some of the slides I talked about last week. So this is the third slide, but the first one that had actual data and information about why that, or how, I guess, this research was done, why it's so important, and what difference does Gottman's research make versus how things have always been done in the past. And of course, the reason that we are doing this study in the first place, like I said last week, is because just like with the Enneagram, that helps you to understand yourself and better understand other people from a personality perspective, and understanding the way that God made you to be and coming closer to that. He also wants that in our marriages and in our relationships. And remember, this doesn't just have to be a spouse. This could be any relationship, and how you treat those in the relationship and how you react to things. So make sure to focus on that. All of this has to do with becoming closer to the way that God wanted you to be as an individual and as a couple, okay? So the first slide that we're gonna just kind of go over very quickly again was the how he did what he did, predicting divorce with a 91% accuracy. So all of this was based on his scientific data and research that he collected over 40 years. Specifically, he was 14 years in the Love Lab. But he was able to predict divorce by listening to these couples talk, argue, interact within as little as 15 minutes. So that's nice, that's lovely, but it's not about predicting divorce for him. It's not just, this isn't a game. This isn't, let's see how many we can get right. It's about preventing divorces. Thanks to his scientific data collection and analysis, we no longer have to guess why some of the couples stay happily married. He identified not only those elements that cause people to move towards divorce, but the elements that kept people together as well. So are there any questions on this slide? Or it's pretty self-explanatory, right?
Can you explain the Love Lab one more time so I get that?
Right. So the Love Lab is, it was a like an apartment that he had set up, and couples were invited to come and stay the weekend in this Love Lab. They were able to bring their hobbies, crossword puzzles. They were able to bring their pets with them. Whatever made them feel like they were at home and not just in a clinical lab. This apartment was set up to look just like a regular house, and the main difference is that there were cameras everywhere, and they were hooked up to electrodes the whole time. So they were able to see their interactions, hear their interactions, see facial expressions and body expressions. They were able to detect like blood pressure, pulse, sweat levels. All of those are indicators of possible trouble, in the marriage. Or it could also detect the opposite. If even in the course of an argument, their blood pressure stayed fairly level, that indicated that they weren't doing some of the things that we're going to see hopefully later today. So you'll see as we progress through these slides, exactly what happens when we get into those situations where we argue. Okay, the next slide. Emotionally intelligent marriages. This is what Gottman identified as one of the key factors, or the key factor, in stable relationships and what made marriages last, is that they had emotional intelligence. So this is where I said happily married couples aren't smarter, richer, more psychologically astute than others. That, in fact, probably most of us in here know that money actually causes more problems than it fixes, right? So that definitely is not a factor in stable marriages. They have discovered a dynamic which keeps negative thoughts and feelings about one another or each other from overwhelming the positive ones. So, everybody argues. Here in just a minute, that's a myth we're going to bust again, because I busted it last week. We're going to do it again. But that's just a myth that happy couples don't argue. You can't have two people, I don't care what, two people in a room together and not expect some kind of arguments. It's not about what you're arguing about, it's how you argue, and the fact that you're having a discussion, you're having an argument, but you're not projecting any negative feelings and emotions onto that other person, and vice versa. And happily married couples use yes and rather than yes but, or the negatives. Any questions on that one? No? Okay. Next slide, please. So why save your marriage? This was a really big, important detail that Gottman spent a lot of years researching, because your health actually relies on having a happy marriage. And he said an unhappy marriage can increase your chances of getting sick by roughly 35% and shorten your life by an average of 4 to 8 years. So it's important that we love, trust, respect our partners and vice versa, because your health depends on it. People in unhappy marriages feel chronically physically stressed and emotionally overwrought. You cannot live in that type of feeling of constantly feeling stressed. Not to mention, where are you going to go if you're stressed at home and you don't want to go home because of that level of stress? Where are you going to go? Bar, right? Someplace you shouldn't be. This puts wear and tear on the body and presents as high blood pressure, heart disease, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, psychosis, violence, and even suicide. So we know that a lot of times that's the way out for a lot of people, sadly, is instead of walking out of their marriage, they walk out of their life. Research shows divorce depresses the immune system. If you have a weakened immune system, every single bad little booger is going to come right on board, and you're going to get sick. Kids suffer from divorce just as much as, if not more than, adults do, and we all know that one of the things we talked about last week was that we all understand when it comes to our children that emotionally intelligent children are happier, healthier, they make more friends, they're more self-assured, and an emotionally intelligent child is just as much, if not more important than their academic IQ, right? So why would that not be important for us as adults? And you can teach yourself how to be emotionally intelligent in a relationship just as much as you can teach your child how to be an emotionally intelligent person. So this is all about retraining our brain to think, well, we know everything because we're adults. That's BS, and we all know it. So this is all about refocusing and reframing the things that we have always done, how we've always done it. In fact, in my business, I talk about that all the time, that you get to a certain point in your life and you can't think of insurance the same way anymore. You can't think of retirement planning the same way anymore. So let's stop thinking about our arguments and how we deal with one another in the same way, and shift your focus and reframe it and see it differently so that the outcome will be different. We all know that the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. Well, here we go. Let's stop being insane. Okay, next slide, please. All right, innovative research, revolutionary findings. So before Gottman, we talked about the fact that they mainly used questionnaires, and they would pass out questionnaires and everybody would respond, and oh, miraculously, everybody had a wonderful marriage, right? So what did we say was the big problem with questionnaires? Liars, big fat liars. Humans lie. So this is where I said that we knew that these were not effective because the vast majority of women who had been suffering in an abusive relationship actually reported that they were in happy marriages on these questionnaires. So we know that that's, and Facebook, yeah, oh yeah. On Facebook, everybody is 110 pounds and has perfect skin, and thank you, filters. Too bad filters don't work in real life, right? So yeah, we all know that what you see is not always what you get. So questionnaires were not a reliable source of data collection. So Gottman completely reinvented the whole thing. He had the Love Lab where you can only go so long in the honeymoon phase. You know, you can only pretend for so long when stuff starts actually coming out. And not only that, but your bodily processes aren't going to lie. When your blood pressure goes up and you start sweating and your face turns red, you can't hide that. So he was able to identify a lot of factors that were previously unknown because of the silly questionnaire method. So these results, the results of the Love Lab exams that he was doing, the work he was doing in the Love Lab, are what formed his 7 principles of how to make a marriage work. So this is where he got that information and all that data and studied it for 40 years. He was studying it, not just to identify, oh, you know, this is what makes the divorce. No, he wanted to identify the opposite factors that discover what makes a marriage work. Okay, next page, please. Yes. Okay, exploding myths about marriage. So this is where we talked about so many people have this concept in their mind of, oh, well, I don't have this problem, so my marriage must be fine, or only the people that go through this situation, those are the ones that are in trouble in their marriage. But sometimes that's just not true. And the first one, and probably one that I hear a lot actually, especially when I was doing counseling, was that neuroses or personality problems ruin marriages. Well, we all have our little funky things that, you know, drive each other crazy, right? I'm not going to tell on David, but he might have 1 or 2, right? And I have about 10, don't I? Yeah, I drive him crazy. I can't sit still, so that's one that really drives him crazy. But the run-of-the-mill little crazy things that we do, the little neuroses that we have, everybody has those. If that were the real true problem, then nobody would be married and everybody would be divorced. But we learn to live with and adapt to your partner's little crazy things that they do, and you learn to work around it. Assuming that you don't get into a pattern of pushing those buttons, you know, whenever you feel like, I'm going to just tweak this a little bit. Severe mental illness, of course, on the other hand, is different. So we're not talking about, this is where I got to put the glasses on. We're not talking about the people who have severe psychopathology like addiction, clinical depression, phobias, PTSD, personality or mood disorders. You are not a bad person if you end up having to sever a relationship because somebody has one of those really major problems. One of the things I'd like to point out just from my years of experience here is many of those very serious psychopathological issues, the individual themselves does not see that they have that problem. They don't think they're in the wrong, and they refuse to get any help for it. You cannot maintain a proper relationship with somebody who does not acknowledge, refuses to acknowledge that they have an issue that's that severe, and I've been listening to Pastor Chuck Smith every morning talk, starting with Genesis and going through, and I'm in Kings right now. And I know that, we hear this, but as I'm kind of studying along and you realize how many times that God's chosen people do the right thing, do the wrong thing, do the right thing, do the wrong thing, do the right thing, do the wrong thing, right? I mean, it's just repeated over and over and over again. And you just can't live with somebody who is constantly in a repetitive cycle of doing the wrong thing over and over and over again and refuses to acknowledge that they have no part in what's going on in your relationship. And so that is a big misunderstanding, I think, that people think, oh, I can't leave this person who is clinically depressed or addicted to drugs because they need me. If they're not willing to take the step to help themselves, then you're not going to be able, they'll pull you down. Just like in the Bible, that's why God commanded not to marry outside of the faith, because they'll pull you down and make you start doing things you shouldn't be doing. Yes?
To that end, when the Pharisees were questioning Jesus and they said, Moses gave the writing of divorcement.
Yep.
And obviously they were in that discussion. And Jesus said Moses did it because of the hardness of heart.
Yep.
So what you're talking about is a person who refuses to say, I have nothing wrong with me, all the problems with you. And it becomes excessive and actually abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And actually gets you either, abuse doesn't have to be physical, it can be mental and spiritual too, for that matter. So that was Jesus, was hardness of heart and causes it.
Right. So what Randy just said, for those of you that are watching online, is that that when who is it? The Pharisees said, but Moses said you could divorce, and Jesus said it was because of the hardness of heart of the individuals that were involved, and that's this case here. If you've got a situation where they're not admitting, they're not even acknowledging that there's a problem, and they're gaslighting and making the problem you, then there's nothing you can do to change that dynamic. And that is when divorce it's probably going to be more beneficial to you psychologically in the long run than to live in that constant state. So neuroses or personality problems are not what ruin marriages, the small stuff. And I don't consider it a ruined marriage if the other person is unwilling to get treatment. That you did not ruin that marriage, that person caused that by their behaviors. The next one is that common interests will keep you together. This is the one that I said last week. In the book, they talked about, well, what if you both decide to start kayaking? And that's great. I actually have a very good friend who has just recently taken up kayaking. And she is blowing and going. She is gone more than she's in town now, because she is going to all over the state of Texas, Arkansas, and going kayaking. And her husband said, nope, no interest, bye, I love you, And he acknowledged that that wasn't anything for him, plus she's getting really good at it, and stuff. But if the two of you take up kayaking and one says, you're doing it wrong constantly, then how is that a positive interaction for the two of you to share that common interest? Because guess what? The other person eventually, that is not going to be an interest for them anymore. They're going to say, see you later, have fun, let's keep our marriage stable, and I don't want to see you for another few weeks. Okay. The next one is you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, right? That's a tit for tat, a quid pro quo, and that does not work. That is keeping a running tally of who does what for whom in a relationship. And we all know that is bad news. Just don't do it. Avoiding conflict will ruin your marriage. I've already said right at the top, we can't avoid conflict. If you try, one of you is lying, because one of you is holding it in and pushing it down. And what happens? I know there's a couple people in here that like to do that, like to push it down. What happens when you do that? Marcy looked at Brandon, so. It comes out. It does. It's going to explode, and you're going to say things and do things that you can't take back, right? So that is absolutely not the way to have a good marriage. Yes.
But isn't that listed as a myth?
Yes.
Conflict will ruin your marriage, so you should have the conflict.
You should have conflict. Yes. You can't avoid the conflict. Like, so what it's saying is that if you try to avoid that, the myth is that if you avoid conflict, everything's good.
That's not what it said.
Well,
So that's what I'm asking.
Those are myths.
Right.
yeah.
So the truth would be avoiding conflict will help your marriage, would be the truth.
No. It's the myth is if you
Avoid conflict.
if you think that avoiding conflict will ruin your marriage. So I see what you're saying, and I can't.
Yeah, because the opposite would be
Yeah.
conflict helps your marriage, which would be the truth if that's.
Yeah, I can't explain it.
No, the opposite would be having conflict.
Yeah.
But no, you can't choose both.
It's let me tell you because I didn't write this. I took this straight from the book. So I'll tell you what he means by this is that the myth that people think that avoiding I get what you're saying. Avoiding conflict will ruin your marriage or help your. In this case, it should, I guess, for a myth say help your marriage, but it really won't. You can't avoid conflict. You shouldn't. You have to have conflict because you can't have two people in a room and not have conflict at some point. The next one is affairs are the root cause of divorce. And again, based on what we talked about last week, if an affair occurs, the problem has already existed for a while. An affair is the symptom of a problem that already exists, not the cause of it. The next one is men are not biologically built for marriage. And this is where I said, regardless of natural laws, other species follow. Extramarital affairs among humans does not depend on gender, but opportunity. The rate of women having affairs actually exceeds men now. So that whole, a man can't be faithful because they were built to spread it around? Yeah, that's not true. Not human men. And then men and women are from different planets. We all know that's not true either, even though we do think differently and we do have different emotional states, which is good because you have to have a balance. But this said, from my notes last week, gender differences may contribute to marital problems, but they don't cause them. The determining factor in whether wives feel satisfied with sex, romance, and passion in their marriage is by 70%. Does anybody remember what I said that women want in their relationships?
Yeah.
Friendship. Exactly. Men, by the determining factor of the same 70%, what was it? Friendship. In all of the studies he did, he discovered that men and women both want friendship in their relationship the most. So forget Mars and Venus. All right, the next slide. So what does it take? What does make a marriage work? So this is where I'm going to start. I know we got through a little bit of this last time, but I'm going to go ahead and start here again for real because I think this is the most important part of what we're trying to study. We've seen the things that, okay, some of these things don't make a marriage work. Yeah, there's fighting, there's all this, but what does make a marriage work? So the first thing to remember is the most important things to keep in mind for this next section is that all couples fight over money, jobs, kids, housekeeping, sex, and in-laws, right? My husband doesn't fight over my mom anymore because yeah. The secret is that couples with high emotional intelligence are able to navigate these difficulties and remain happy and stable. In Gottman's research, he was able to identify that these couples were alike in 7 telltale ways. He said that happily married couples may not be aware that they are following the 7 principles, but they all do it. Unhappily married couples all come up short in at least one area. So let's talk about what does make a marriage work. So I know I read this last week, but I'm going to read it again. At the heart of the 7 principles approach is the simple truth that happy marriages are based on a deep friendship. By this, I mean a mutual respect and enjoyment for one another's company. These couples tend to know each other intimately. They are well versed in each other's likes, dislikes, personality quirks, hopes, and dreams. They have an abiding regard for each other and express this fondness not just in the big ways, but through small gestures day in and day out. So on the friendship versus fighting, I said, do the little things daily that demonstrate to your spouse that you value them, not just the big romantic gestures and lavish gifts that only prove you're out of touch with their daily needs. And so since last week, I have a real live example of that from me and David, because last week we're just trucking along. We show each other respect and prove our love for each other on a daily basis. I don't need, some Valentine's Day card to tell me that he loves me, right? So we're going on along through our everyday life like we always do, and I'm at work, and I think he was actually up here helping pastor with the church and, all this, and I get a text from, it's actually a good friend of David's who's now a good friend of mine, and when David and I got married, it was on this couple's anniversary day, so they had about 30 years ahead of us, but we got married on the same day. And so that Wednesday morning or whatever day it was, he texted me, "Happy anniversary." And I went, "Oh crap, I forgot our anniversary." And I texted or called David and I said, "Hey, did you remember it was our anniversary?" And he said, "No, I didn't remember it was our anniversary." So, that's because the day that we got married, honestly, for me, it was my second marriage. I won't tell how many it was for David, but it wasn't about the wedding to me that day. I could have cared less. We got married at the lake, and ducks were trying to mate in the middle of our ceremony, and it was hilarious. Somebody was calling David in the middle of the ceremony a whole bunch, and he didn't shut his ringer off. So, it was just fun and exciting, and everybody was wearing shorts and T-shirts out at the lake. And I knew that there was a difference. It was because I loved him and I wanted to be married to him and I wanted to have that relationship, and I didn't care about the lavish wedding that I had with my first wedding. That was more about the wedding than the marriage. So it's very, very important to show each other that you love each other every day, and who cares about buying a gift to show how much you love somebody? That's not what shows it. It's the fact that he gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning and cooks chicken for my lunch, or runs to the grocery store and gets avocados for me, or cleans up all of my dishes because he knows I'm busy or whatever. Those are the things that show love, not what, you weren't even thinking of me when you bought this gift or whatever. We don't even care about that stuff. So it's okay to do that. That's just not, you can't do that in lieu of having the daily show of respect. Does that mean you want gifts from me now? Okay, just checking. It's okay to give gifts, but that's not the part that is the most meaningful. So the next part was the positive sentiment override. So positive sentiment override is, and I'm supposed to be reading number 22 through 23. I'm not paying attention on here again. Okay, it doesn't matter. Positive sentiment override is when you have more positive emotional feelings towards your spouse than letting the negative information creep in. If you start offsetting that balance with negative emotions and thoughts, you're not going to recover from an argument. You're not going to be able to recover and go back to that feeling without some intervention, okay? So one of the examples that he said is just like your weight is at a set point, you know, your body wants to maintain a certain weight. So all of us who have ever dieted a million times know that you can do certain things and your body will lose a little bit, but then it'll pop right back up to where it wants to be. You have to actively do something serious to override that, like completely changing your metabolism to override that set point. So he said, set your set point for your marriage at a really high level. Have a lot of positivity and make sure you maintain that, because it's going to take something serious to really pull you down into the negative then, right? So if you're maintaining a positive daily high level of positive sentiment override, it'll take a whole lot to mess with that level. A good example of positive sentiment override? Well, it's in any relationship. I'll give you an example for David and I. I mean, we argue, and sometimes it's about the same silly little things. It might be that he has a tendency to pick up around the house, and he'll pick something up and he won't put it back in the same place twice. So I'm a lot of times on the hunt for something. Where'd you put this? And then he doesn't remember, right? I don't know where I put that. That is a little annoying, okay? But that does not override my overall picture of David and how I feel about David. I love David. That little quirk of his does not override. It has not come into my being and overtaken as a negative feeling. Like in this, I'm not saying this about you, okay, I'm just using this as an example. As an example of a negative sentiment override, somebody might say, well, he's stupid. Why can't he ever put it back in the same place twice? He's just doing this on purpose. He's doing this to mess with me. He's trying to make me mad, and he doesn't understand how much that bothers me, and so he's doing things to me on purpose. Do you see how many times I just pointed at me and it made it all about me? That's a negative, that you start setting that mindset in there, you start getting those thoughts in there, and now you're going to start pulling that positive down into a negative realm. And then guess what happens? The next time he just picks something up and moves it, boom, it's going to be an explosion. You did that on purpose. Why do you do that? You know, that's where we're going to come into some problems there. I'm going to go ahead and go to this next one. I know this time we went through, we basically got back to where we were, but I am going to go over this next one very quickly because I want to explain to you. Did you get a folder? Okay. I want to explain to you one of the handouts that's in your folder, and then we'll stop here, and then I'll just keep going in kind of this slowed down version, and when we get done, we'll get done. But if we don't, we don't. Okay? So, number 24. Okay. As partners increasingly come to know and bond with one another, they build what I call the sound relationship house. The 7 principles comprise the sound relationship house's many floors and levels. These principles are intricately connected to trust and commitment. 2 big words we need to know, trust and commitment, which form the house's protective, weight-bearing walls. So in your folder, you have a handout of Gottman's Sound Relationship House these are the principles we'll begin going over so you can use it as your guide for where each of these levels are, but just understand that without those two walls, you can't hold up the roof, you can't keep the elements out of your house, the rain, the sleet, the snow, you can't keep intruders out. You have to have those two walls, four, but in a two-dimensional page, two walls. So you have to have those walls of trust and commitment. Without them, everything else will fall. Nothing can stand. Yes? It's the building your sound relationship house. Oh, do I have a slide of that? No. If the people online want to see it, they have to come to church. Okay. Imagine two couples in the Love Lab. One shows all the signs of being supportive and attuned to each other's needs. Their biological readouts confirm this. Blood pressure, heart rate, all of that. Their happiness is contingent on their partner's happiness. That's a sound relationship house. How many of you have ever caught yourselves thinking that, like, I want things to work for him or her. I want to make him or her happy, right? I want to do this because I know it's going to make them happy. The other couple shows a lack of understanding about each other, and they are stuck. The other couple shows a lack of understanding or faith in their relationship. Negative sentiment override creeps in. They absorb a state of negativity about each other, and they are stuck in the Roach Motel for lovers. Couples check in, but they rarely check out. Without the walls of a sound relationship house, relationships are ripped apart and left unguarded from the lure of outside forces. What did I say earlier about affairs? You're already in trouble. You were already in trouble long before because your walls were down. They are likely headed for a betrayal, an affair, being emotionally distant, siding with a parent against your mate. Did you know that was a betrayal? Yes. You're supposed to cleave unto your spouse, not your mama. Disrespecting your partner and breaking significant promises. All betrayal lies at the heart of every failed relationship. And that's what it boils down to, is all of those are betrayals, including an affair. And at every level of a failed marriage, you can find betrayal on some level. So you now have your handout, so we can go through that as we go, keep track of it as we go. We'll go ahead and stop there today. So, yes? You're going to have to speak up. I can't hear you. You mean somebody that appears to be happy, overly happy?
No, that just tries to get all their happiness
from somebody else? Yeah. Well, yes, for sure. That's not real happiness. You can't acquire your happiness from somebody else. It has to come from within. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up in a negative sentiment override when that person can't supply all of your happiness. Yes?
That is actually very unhealthy. And what Katie's talking about, this is very important to notice because it's very scriptural, is that you are concerned about your spouse's happiness. They're concerned about your happiness. They're not concerned about you have to make me happy.
Right.
I want to make you happy. And the fulfillment comes from that.
Yeah, there are many scriptures, but it's not, this isn't about you laying yourself down and not making any considerations for yourself either. You have to protect yourself as well. But if you spend your time trying to make sure that your spouse is happy, you're not necessarily the one providing all of that. I'm not going to stay home and feed David grapes all day to make him happy, okay? But I check in with him regularly and say, is everything okay? How are you feeling? He came home after painting and he was hurting real bad. And I was like, well, why don't you go, lay down, take an Advil, rest, recover. So that's what I'm talking about when I say your spouse's happiness. It's not, I'm not gonna let him go fish all day long every day and just to make him happy and then make myself miserable. Okay, that's not what making sure that your spouse is happy. It has to be a balance, but making sure that his well-being comes first is what it boils down to. Okay, any other questions, concerns, queries? All right, well, we'll pick it back up next week. We've got lots of stuff to go over still.
All right, good job. So this is really good, and